Good afternoon, everybody, and Merry Christmas. Today is December 25, 2025. So I wanted to make this recording today without any intro music, no setup, no performance, just me talking on Christmas. Because this time of year has a way of amplifying things whether we want it or not. You know, Christmas tends to bring up a lot for people. It brings up tenderness, pressure, love, expectation, and often not in clean or separate ways, but in these ways that are kind of layered together in the body at the same time. So if you're listening to this today, or honestly, anytime around the holidays, there's a good chance that you feel a little off and you don't know how to articulate it, right? You don't feel bad, you don't feel broken, you don't feel like something's wrong with you, but more like you're noticing things that usually stay quieter under the surface. And that's what I wanted to talk about today. The shadow side of Christmas. You know, we don't name that side very often, not because it's dark or negative per se, but because it doesn't fit neatly into the version of the holiday that we're expected to perform or uphold, right? Christmas is a little bit of a psychological amplifier. Holidays are rituals, and one of the things that rituals do really well, whether we realize it or not, is they amplify whatever is already present. They don't create new emotions out of nowhere, but they turn up the volume on existing dynamics, right? Christmas especially, it tends to magnify the systems that we grew up inside of, the emotional tone of our families, the roles that we learned to play in our families early on, the parts of ourselves that were praised and rewarded, but also the parts that were quietly discouraged or pushed out of sight. For a lot of people, Christmas comes with an unspoken demand to become a slightly smaller version of yourself, more agreeable, more grateful, more pleasant, more forgiving, more put together, even if that version no longer fits who you are right now or how you actually live your life. And, speaking of this, I want to give you a little bit of some personal insight. And if my parents hear this, that's okay. They know it too. In my family, I was the fuck up. I was the rebel. I was the one that was so smart, but never put it to good use, right? I'm an immigrant child. So you can imagine I come from Eastern Europe. There was a lot of pressure on me when I was young to go to university, but not just for anything. I had to go to university for business or science or something that was going to help me make a lot of money and get me a good, safe, high-paying job. I was expected to look and dress and talk and behave in certain ways that were deemed as respectable by my culture and society. And I'm sure that you can guess that I didn't really live up to those expectations. But more on my childhood and more detail in a later episode. But I just wanted to give you that background that, when I go home for Christmas, all of that stuff comes up for me. At Christmas, anything that doesn't fit that image of quote unquote being put together, right? Things like frustration, grief, desire, resentment, exhaustion. Those things have no place to go. They get pushed underground in the name of keeping the peace and being mature and not ruining the holiday. But here's the thing, and this is what I talk about a lot on my Substack, and what I'm going to be talking about a lot on this podcast, is that repressing something doesn't make it disappear. It just changes the way that it speaks to you. So when emotions don't have permission to be named, they find other languages. They find ways that they come up in our body, in our moods, in our fantasies, in how close or distant we suddenly feel from the people around us. Like, could you guys actually imagine a life where you could just show up for family dinner and say, hey, I'm actually super depressed this year. It's been a super tough year financially, emotionally, and spiritually. I'm not going to be able to come across as super happy, but I'm here and I love you guys, right? How cool would it be if everybody at dinner just accepted that truth without trying to fix you, without trying to make it better? What if people could just hold space for who you are right now and how you show up in this moment? and not expect anything outside of that. That would be super cool, hey? But unfortunately, that's a very rare situation in very in families that have done their spiritual work, you know what I mean? Because at the end of the day, generally speaking, most of us mask up for Christmas. When we go home, we visit our families, we put the mask on, right? We walk in and everything's fine. Everything's fine. How are you doing? Great. I'm doing so great. How are you doing? Great. So great. It is so fake, right? It's lovely. It is lovely to see your family, get caught up with friends, have big dinners. But a lot of the time, it's fake, right? When you go around the table and ask everyone how they're doing, and everybody has got some sort of amazing story of how great things are going. I mean, it would be cool if that was all real, but we know the truth, right? People deal with hard stuff, especially around the holidays, especially around times like these that we're living in right now, with a lot of financial struggle and a lot of political instability, right? People are going to have a hard time, and and we don't show up that way. We show up as everything's fine. Let's actually dive into family roles and the shadow, because that's what Christmas is really about, right? It's about family. So what does that bring up for people? What's the shadow side? One of the things that always fascinates me about Christmas, and honestly about just going home in general, is just how quickly old roles come back online, right? Even when you've done a lot of work on yourself. You can be independent, self-aware, emotionally literate, deeply resourced in your adult life, and still you feel yourself snap back into who you were as a teenager, like the moment you step into a family space. It happens fast, and it is rarely conscious, right? You just suddenly notice yourself speaking differently, holding your body differently, filtering what you say, anticipating reactions before anyone's even had a chance to respond. And before you know it, you're back in a familiar position. You're, depending on who you are in your family, you could be the peacemaker, the caretaker, the rebel, the quiet one, the disappointment. It doesn't matter, but everybody has that role that they unconsciously go into. And it's not because you choose it. It's because your nervous system recognizes the environment and defaults to what once kept you safe. That literally happens to me all the time. Like I'll be going to my parents' house. I'm in the best mood in the car. I get out of the car to walk to my parents' house. And the second I open the door and step into that house, like the second I cross that threshold, something changes. I immediately revert back to when I was 15 years old and getting yelled at for skipping class and smoking weed outside in the ravine. And that's how fast it happens. It is instantaneous. All of a sudden, I become defensive and awkward and apologetic and guilty, even though 30 seconds before crossing that threshold, I was a completely different adult person in the car. And I was telling myself how great of a day I was having and how control I am, how in control I am of my emotions. And then I walk through that door and it just all goes away. And I become my 15-year-old self again. It happens. It doesn't happen every time, right? I've learned how to be more in control, but sometimes it does happen and it catches me off guard. And, what's important to understand here is that these roles don't live in the intellectual mind. You can't think your way out of them in the moment. They live in the body. They live in memory. They live in pattern. And Christmas activates them so strongly because it's saturated with sensory information, right? The same smells, the same sounds, the same traditions, the same spaces, right? The nervous system responds to those cues long before the rational mind has time to catch up. That's why so many people experience irritation, sadness, numbness, exhaustion around the holidays, and they don't really understand why. And it's not necessarily because anything bad is happening in the present moment. It's just often because parts of you are being quietly asked to disappear again in order to keep things smooth, familiar, or emotionally manageable for everybody else. And for me personally, it's not even about me slipping into an old role as often as it's just about me hiding my pain to protect my parents from worrying. I'm an only child, and there's this unspoken expectation that if I show up as strong and capable, that's the way it needs to be because one day I'll be on my own. So a lot of my grief doesn't really have a place to land when I'm with my parents because I don't want to make them worry about me. And sometimes it's not even just them worrying about me, but sometimes I'll get a response that I really don't want to deal with when I'm feeling grief, right? If I try to express my grief or my sadness, sometimes I'll get you got to tough it up. You got to tough it up, Mira. Life is hard. You just got to keep going. And that's the Eastern European way. And sometimes when I'm dealing with pain, that's not what I want to hear. So I've learned over time that when I go for family dinners, when I go for holidays, I keep that stuff to myself and I pretend like everything's fine so that everyone can feel at peace, right? And that's where the shadow comes in. Not as something dramatic or sinister, but as the parts of you that don't have permission to exist openly in that environment, right? The frustration that you don't voice, the grief that you keep contained, the desire that you redirect inward, the exhaustion you pretend isn't there and you just drink 5 coffees and not let anybody know that you'd rather be sleeping. Those parts don't vanish because you don't express them. They stay active beneath the surface, shaping how you present, or how you even distance yourself from people, right? How patient or irritable you become, how connected or disconnected your body feels in the room. All of it ties in together. And let's talk about the subtle erotic layer of Christmas, because I wouldn't be myself if I didn't bring that up in this show. There's another layer to this time of year that people pretty much never talk about, honestly, even though it's very much there in the background, right? And that's desire, because Christmas is one of those very sexually restrained periods in our culture where everything is polite and proper and contained and organized around family, tradition, and acceptable behavior. And yet, desire doesn't disappear in that environment. If anything, it becomes more noticeable. What happens instead is that desire goes inward, right? When the external world becomes more controlled and disciplined, fantasy tends to get louder, imagination becomes more active, and there's often this subtle increase in restlessness or internal heat that people don't quite know what to do with. And this isn't a problem or pathology or anything. It's just noticing. It's just noticing the fact that people don't really know what to do with this desire that's under the surface around Christmas. They don't even know what to name it, right? It's actually a predictable response because desire responds to contrasts. It responds to denial, to longing, to what is withheld. So when the environment becomes more restrained and more structured, the erotic imagination often becomes more alive in response. That's why people can feel more desire, more fantasy, and more agitation during the holidays, even if nothing in their external life has changed, and even if they're not acting on any of it. But it can still get confusing, right? For a lot of people, this confusion actually creates shame because we're not taught to understand desire as something that fluctuates in response to context. We're taught to either indulge it or suppress it. But desire doesn't work that cleanly, as we know. It moves in relation to pressure, containment, and atmosphere. And Christmas is full of all of these three. So unfortunately, for a lot of people, Christmas brings about shame for their desire because their desire tends to be louder because the atmosphere is restrained. So It's a really funny kind of loop that ties into itself. And once people become aware of it and you understand what's going on, everything's good, everything's great. But yeah, it's something that we really should be talking about more so that people don't carry this shame with them around the holidays about being in their heads and fantasizing some really wild stuff. It would be nice if it was just accepted and we understood it and we let the fantasies run wild. Why not? Indulge in them. They can be fun, right? Nobody's with you in bed late at night. you can still have fun with your fantasies around Christmas, and not have to feel shame or weird sensations around it. But the body's doing a lot during Christmas, right? More than we consciously realize it's doing. There is so much sensory overload, right? We've got more noise, more lights, more movement, more people. It's all layered on top of social performance, expectations, the pressure to show up in certain ways for extended periods of time. And for some people, there's forced closeness that feels overwhelming or misattuned. For others, there's acute loneliness that becomes more visible precisely because everyone else seems to be gathered together. And for many people, there's also a kind of touch confusion that happens around the holidays, right? Hugs that are socially expected but don't actually feel intimate, proximity without real emotional attunement, or the complete absence of touch altogether. And the body notices all of this, even when the mind hasn't fully put language to it yet. And when the body is taking in more stimulation, more emotional labor, more unspoken tension that it can comfortably process, then it shows up in very indirect ways, such as fatigue, irritability, a sense of restlessness, a quiet desire to withdraw or disappear for a while. So I want to be very clear about something that you probably need to hear, okay? None of that makes you ungrateful. And I have to stress this because this is really like the thesis of this podcast right now. It's to explain the shadow side of Christmas so that you don't have to feel like there's something wrong with you, okay? Feeling all kinds of weird emotions around this time of year doesn't mean that you don't appreciate your family or the holiday or the fact that you're not alone. It simply means that your body is responding honestly to what is being asked to hold. And that is not failure of character. That is embodiment. So we're getting close to the end here, and I want to talk about integration instead of performance. Because this is really the bread and butter of what I try to teach in the world. And one of the quieter lies of Christmas is the idea that love should feel easy. That if you really love your family or if things are good, then presents should come naturally and without friction. But real love, real presence, almost always includes complexity. It includes discomfort. It includes parts of you that don't fit neatly into tradition, expectation, or the version of yourself you're supposed to present during the holidays. And the shadow isn't here to ruin anything. It's not here to create drama or take something away from the holiday. It's here to tell the truth about what you're carrying, about what's asking to be acknowledged instead of managed or pushed aside. And the truth is, you don't have to fix any of it today. You don't have to confront anyone. You don't have to resolve decades of family dynamics or heal everything before dessert. That kind of pressure is just another form of performance. Sometimes, the most radical thing you can do is simply notice what's happening inside you and stay present to it without tuning or without tuning into something else, without turning yourself into a version that feels smaller or quieter or more acceptable than who you actually are. So if Christmas brings up tenderness for you, let it. If it brings up grief, desire, frustration, or longing, let that exist as well. You're not failing the holiday because you feel complex things. You're just being human. And sometimes the most honest gift you can give yourself isn't fixing anything or reframing it or trying to be more grateful. It's simply giving yourself permission to feel what's actually there without apologizing for it. That's really all I wanted to offer today. I thank you all for listening. And wherever you are, I really hope that you can be gentle with yourself this holiday season. Much love to everybody. Merry Christmas once again, and I'll see you next time.